I've been putting up with you, making me feel terrible all this time. So the least you can do is contribute to the wedding costs. It's your daughter's big day, after all. But why aren't you inviting me to the wedding? Well, it would be embarrassing. I would have wanted Dad to be there, but I don't want people to know I have a countryside grandma, like you, as my mother. You're living off Dad's estate and pension, yet you have the audacity to show up at ceremonies and act all important? It's just shameless. My name is Stacy. I lost my husband Bennett a few years ago, and now I live alone. The house that Bennett, who was a CEO, left me feels too big for just myself. However, I manage by enjoying my gardening hobby. I have 2 children, my son Ralph and my daughter Ellie. Both are independent and do not live with me. Ralph got married last year and lives in the neighboring state, while Ellie is single and seems to be focused on her work, although she plans to get married to her boyfriend soon. To others, it might seem like I'm enjoying a comfortable retirement, with my children being independent. I do feel blessed, but I also have my worries, especially about my daughter Ellie. Since she was a child, Ellie has always been a strong-willed, competitive, and active girl, unlike me, who was more laid back. She didn't get along with me and was closer to Bennett, who was more active in society. When Bennett fell ill, Allie's attitude towards me got worse, and when he passed away, she blamed me, saying, "This happened because Mom wasn't strong enough." I was already emotionally drained from losing Bennett, and Ellie's words were just too much for me. However, with Ralph's support, I was able to recover. Ralph comforted me, saying, "It's not your fault, Mom. You did your best. It's just that you and Ellie have different personalities, so don't worry about it." However, Ellie's attitude towards me didn't change, and she stopped coming home, even for Christmas. Now, we rarely see each other. I found out that Ellie is considering marrying her boyfriend, not from her, but from someone else. Ellie lives in a condominium nearby, but she rarely visits or contacts me. Even if I contacted her, the probability of a reply was low. I thought maybe the company was busy, so I refrained from insisting on contacting them. But one day, I was surprised to hear about Ellie's recent situation in a call from Ralph. "By the way, Mom, have you heard about Ellie?" "What's that?" "Oh, dear. She hasn't told Mom anything again. Ellie, you see, is getting married to her college boyfriend." "What? I haven't heard anything about that. I haven't even met the boyfriend." "The 2 of them often travel together and bring us souvenirs from various places. I always told her to properly talk to you, but you haven't even met him." "She doesn't come here at all. I thought she was too busy with work to come." "Really? She said she's not busy at all since she moved apartments. She's been able to go to various places with her boyfriend because of that." Ralph was certainly surprised, but I was even more so. There was so much I didn't know about Ellie, and it was hard to have a conversation with Ralph. "By the way, what's Ellie's boyfriend like?" "Well, his name is Glenn. To be honest, I don't really like him. I think he's a good match for Ellie's personality, but..." "Ralph is gentle and similar to me in personality. If he doesn't like Glenn, then I probably won't either." Adding to that, the information that Glenn is a good match for Ellie's personality gave me a rough idea of what kind of person he is. "I'm worried about various things." "I understand how you feel, but Ellie is an adult. She'll be fine. They'll probably get along well as a married couple, and won't bother Mom too much." "Is that so? That's a bit sad, but it can't be helped." The conversation ended there, but the problem was what happened afterward. A few weeks after the call with Ralph, I finally received a contact from Ellie. Hearing from Ellie after a long time was undoubtedly a happy occasion, even if she hated me, and I was noticeably cheerful when I answered the phone. "It's been a while. Why did you suddenly contact me? Did something happen?" My cheerful voice was the complete opposite of Ellie's, which was stiff and cold. I got married last week. What? I was stunned by Ellie's unexpected statement. And I have a favor to ask. When I told my husband about our house, he said he wanted to live together. We're going to decide on a new house eventually, but can we temporarily live in your house? You have plenty of rooms to spare, right? Well, there are rooms, but being asked so suddenly... I've already arranged for the movers. I've also terminated my apartment lease. It's not a big deal if 2 more people move into that big house, right? I felt angry at Ellie for selfishly moving things forward, despite having neglected her family home until now. If you've already canceled the room, there was nothing I could do but accept it. Fine, but you must find a new place immediately. Who do you think you are? That house was built by Dad, and you're living off the money and pension he left behind. Really, Ellie? That's all I wanted to talk about. Goodbye. With that, Ellie hung up the phone. I was at a loss as to what to do. But there was nothing to be done. The thought of someone else in the space I had been alone in for so long might be surprisingly pleasant, and I hoped that living with Ellie again would help mend our relationship. On the day, I prepared lunch for 2, waiting anxiously for Ellie to arrive. When the doorbell rang, I welcomed her in. Hi, long time no see. It's been a while. Ellie's appearance had changed dramatically. Her hair was dyed blue and white, and she wore flashy clothes unlike before. What happened to your hair? Didn't your company say anything? Huh? Company? I quit. What? And since I'm back, I won't have any trouble living. Stop nagging me about my looks, just because you dress like an old lady. Just as I was starting to feel uneasy about our future, a man entered. Hi, I'm Glenn. I married Ellie. Nice to meet you. Hi. I'm Stacy. Nice to meet you too. This is a big house. The yard is huge. We could have a barbecue. Right, Ellie? Yeah, let's invite everyone over next week. Ellie's attitude towards me changed completely, and she chatted happily with Glenn. They stomped upstairs, calling in the movers, and pushed past me on the stairs. Hey, Mom, we can choose any room, right? One for me and Glenn each. Yes. I made lunch. Do you want any? No thanks. We'll eat out later. Saying that, the 2 began unpacking noisily. From the 2nd floor, there was never-ending noise and laughter, and one cardboard box after another was carried in by the movers. The cardboard boxes that didn't fit in the room were left on the 1st floor. It seemed that the 2 had finished unpacking as they came downstairs. It looked like they were going out to eat. What are you going to do with these cardboard boxes? Oh, just leave them there. We'll be back. It felt like the storm had passed, but I couldn't help sighing at the sight of the large cardboard boxes left in the corridor. Life afterwards was stifling. They acted as if I didn't exist, and gradually the house began to fall into disarray. They didn't cook, clean, or do laundry, and all those burdens fell on me. Glenn had a job, but he seemed to be changing jobs frequently, and I doubted he was earning a decent salary. Ellie, who had quit her job, showed no sign of looking for work and mostly spent her time lying on the sofa, fiddling with her mobile phone. Hey, Ellie, are you looking for a job? Shut up! Glenn's working, isn't he? But still, I've been a housewife for years, so don't act like you're any better. I'll work when I find a job that suits me. She would change the topic and snap at me, and in the end, we would never have a real conversation. I was already getting sick of this stifling situation, but before I knew it, a week had passed since Ellie and Glenn moved in. One Saturday morning, I saw Ellie and Glenn busy preparing something, so I asked them what was happening. Huh? Didn't we tell you we're having a barbecue to celebrate our move? Our friends are coming over later, so be nice. What? Didn't you hear Stacy? Mom, you're so slow and forgetful. Oh, and stay in your room. It'd be embarrassing if our friends saw you. They laughed at me and, without asking for permission, started setting up the grill and chairs in the garden. Later, their friends arrived and they all had a barbecue, making a racket from the afternoon. I watched from my room on the second floor as my carefully tended garden and flowers were trampled and destroyed, and felt a mix of anger and sadness well up inside me. In the evening, the barbecue seemed to be over, but Ellie and her friends were getting ready to go out. "Ellie, where do you think you're going, leaving everything like this?" "Hey, Mom, we told you to stay in your room." Even Glenn's friends, who were headed to the car, stopped at the sound of my voice. Glenn, apparently drunk, pointed at me and started laughing. "Oh, it's Parasite, Stacy." "Huh? Parasite?" "That's what Ellie's been calling her. She's been living at our house like a parasite for years. That's why Ellie said she won't invite her to the wedding. She's been saying that since they were dating. She'll take her money but won't invite her." Glenn laughed loudly as he said this, and his friends dragged him to the car. Ellie laughed mockingly as I stood there, stunned. "Well, that's what I think. She's made me feel bad for years, so the least she can do is pay for the wedding. It's her daughter's big day, right?" "But not inviting her to the wedding? What's that about?" "I'd be embarrassed. If Dad were alive, I'd want him there. But I don't want people to find out my mother is like some country grandma. She's living off Dad's estate and pension like a parasite, and then she shows up at weddings and funerals, acting all important. It's just too much." Ellie laughed again as she walked past me. "Oh, and can you clean up the garden? I'm going out for drinks." With that, she got in the car with her friends and drove off. I sighed as I looked at the messy garden, realizing that the innocent Ellie who used to play there was gone. Maybe she changed for the worse because of Glenn and his friends. But her feelings towards me haven't changed. She genuinely feels that way about me. That I'm a leech living off Bennett's estate, that I'm not independent or interesting. But I have a secret that I haven't told my children. About 10 years ago, I started investing in stocks with Bennett's guidance, and now I receive $20,000 in dividends annually. So I actually have enough money to move out and live on my own. In fact, I've been considering selling this house because it's become too difficult to manage as I've aged. But it's also the house where I shared so many memories with Bennett, and I don't want my children to lose their childhood home. But now that things have come to this, I need to do something. I was resting after cleaning up when I got a call from Ralph. "Mom, I heard. Did Ellie and Glenn come to the house?" I can't say I'm okay. They've been here for a week, and I'm already exhausted. "I knew it. Mom, those two are planning to take over the house. They might even try to take the estate. I've met Glenn, and he's the type to spend money recklessly. Ellie said she's almost out of savings." "What? She used up her savings?" "Yeah, she was calm about it, but I was shocked. She said they were planning to have a destination wedding. Do you think she's serious?" "They're probably expecting me to pay for it." Ellie and Glenn's true colors were starting to show. At the same time, a thought crossed my mind. "By the way, Ralph, may I come visit soon? There's something I'd like to discuss with you. After hearing everything, I feel like we can't let things continue this way." Yes. We need to talk about it. And if Mom comes, Judy will be happy too. We'll be waiting." A few days later, I headed to Ralph's house. Glenn had gone to work, but Ellie was still sleeping late, as usual. I told her I was leaving through the bedroom door, but there was no response. Ralph's wife, Judy, warmly welcomed me, a visitor from the next state over. She seemed to have heard the situation from Ralph. "Stacy, I've heard from Ralph. I know there's a lot we need to talk about, but please, make yourself at home while you're here." "Thank you, Judy." After being welcomed by the two of them, I first revealed the secret of my assets. They were both surprised to learn that I, whom they thought was a housewife, actually owned stock and received approximately $20,000 in dividends annually. but they were even more surprised when they heard about my next proposition. I'm worried that if Ellie and the others find out I have stock, it will lead to trouble. Given the current situation, I think it's just a matter of time. So, I'd like to transfer my stock to you two at this time. What? Are you sure? Us? Isn't there another way? No, I want to give it to you. After a moment of silence, during which they seemed to be overwhelmed by my momentum, they looked at each other and reluctantly nodded. Then, after consulting in low voices, Ralph spoke up. So, as a way of saying thank you, how about Mom lives with us in this house? What? We were just talking about it, Ralph and I. That house is too big for Stacy to live in alone, and we're worried about you. It seems like the right time. What do you think? I gladly accepted their proposal. Afterwards, I made the bold decision to sell the house I had been living in. The process of transferring the stock to Ralph and his wife, as well as the sale of the house, were completed without a hitch. As I quietly packed up the house, Ellie, who seemed to find my actions suspicious, approached me. Mom, it looks like things are disappearing from the house. Is something going on? Oh, I was going to tell you. I've decided to sell the house. You two will need to leave soon. What? What do you mean? I'm moving to Ralph's house tomorrow, so please leave as soon as possible. If you stay, I'll call the police. What are you talking about? I can't deal with this all of a sudden. But you don't even listen to me, and you never call back when I reach out. Hearing Ellie's voice, Glenn also came downstairs to find out what was happening, and sure enough, he was furious. Hey, Ellie, what's this all about? Weren't we supposed to be able to live here forever? I don't know. I'm just as surprised as you are. I won't interfere with you and your husband anymore, so don't worry. I hope your wedding will be a wonderful one. Wait a minute, Mom, you're going to help pay for the wedding, right? It's your daughter's big day. No, I'm a parasite, remember? I don't have any money to give you. And I've decided to have Ralph and Judy manage all my assets, including my stocks. Ellie and Glenn's faces twisted more and more. I glanced at the two of them as I was getting ready to leave from the entrance. Stocks? Mom, when did you do that? You've been calling me a parasite and pension-living grandma, but even I have my strength. I had a $20,000 dividend from stock investments every year. I was actually considering giving some to you. Well, take care. As I closed the entrance door, I could hear them arguing from inside the house. I was worried, but at the same time, I felt a strong sense of relief and joy, thinking, I finally told them off. I clenched my fist and headed to Ralph's house. After that, Ellie and Glenn managed to find a place to live, but their relationship quickly became strained. They visited me once, completely different from before, trying to butter me up and win me over. What's more, Glenn, perhaps because he knew I had some stocks left, bragged about recently starting stock trading and tried to get me to give him some. I remember finding it amusing how transparent his intentions were. Since then, the two have been living separately. Ellie seems to be having a hard time finding a new job. But she has no savings, and she has to make a living, so she's been working part-time jobs day and night while looking for employment. It's easy to imagine how mentally cornered she must feel, given that she used to look down on people who couldn't earn their own living. But I had no intention of helping her. She and Glenn, who have always looked down on their parents and called them parasites, are now getting their just desserts. I hope they manage to support each other and prevent their already difficult lives from falling apart completely. As for me, I am now living a peaceful and contented life with my eldest son and his wife. I share hobbies with Judy, and when I think about the suffocating days I used to have, I'm so glad I decided to live with them. Recently, my grandchildren were born. They are adorable little girls, like angels. Supporting busy Judy is hard, but I feel very fulfilled every day. Since they are gentle children, I don't have to worry about them growing up to call their parents parasites like someone else we know. From now on, I want to continue to live a peaceful and happy life, savoring the true happiness that is characteristic of me, with Ralph and Judy and the grandchildren. I won't give personal information to a fake mother. An unbelievable line came out of my son's wife's mouth, and I was speechless, my mind made up. Even when I asked, "Won't you regret this?" she replied with a mocking tone, "No way." Well, there's nothing I can do. I'm not a weak woman who cowers at words. You've crossed the line, and you shouldn't have. My name is Mariah, and I'm about to turn 60. I lost my husband and raised 2 children with all my might. Fortunately, I've loved Japanese culture since I was young, and that led me to pursue the path of calligraphy. I became a licensed instructor in Japan and was able to support my family with my beloved calligraphy work. Life is unpredictable, so the 3 of us lived in a small apartment without luxury, practiced frugal living, and saved money every month. My eldest son, Simon, was an easy child when he was young, but as he grew older, I felt his emotional weakness. My daughter Liddy, unlike her brother, grew into a spirited and lively girl. My hard-working daughter earned her tuition through part-time work without relying on me, graduated from college, got a job at her first-choice company, and is working enthusiastically. Simon was indecisive, and at 35, he still hadn't found a partner. I was worried, but being single for life is not uncommon these days, so I was careful not to pressure him about marriage. There are countless people who marry and become unhappy, so marriage does not necessarily equal happiness. Then, Simon brought his girlfriend home. My daughter and I were curious about what kind of girl she was, but we were taken aback because she was so different from what we had imagined. Of course, we shouldn't judge people by their appearance, but she seemed to weigh more than the 132-pound slender Simon. But before Simon could introduce her, Gloriana said, "He kept saying he wanted me to meet his mom, so here I am today. Nice to meet you." Normally, one would be nervous in front of a partner's parents, but Gloriana was calm. Also, it's common sense to call him Simon in front of his parents, even if you usually call him this guy. Am I just old-fashioned? When I served tea and cake, Gloriana ate the strawberry shortcake in 2 seconds, chugged the tea, and said, "More please." After some chit-chat, my daughter asked, "Gloriana, what do you do for a living?" "Call me sister." That's a bit... My daughter probably didn't want to call her sister, and I felt the same way. Is Simon planning to marry this woman? Work? I'm not working now. I had an annoying senior who nagged me, so I choked him from behind, and I got fired. A red card is too harsh, don't you think? I was astonished, but I needed to teach her common sense as a working adult. Times have changed, and there are laws that prevent easy dismissal, but violence in the workplace can be grounds for immediate termination. Then Gloriana glared at Simon with a smile and slapped his shoulder. "Hey, your mom took the side of my senior. You're just going to stay silent in her pinch?" My son looked troubled and said nothing. I was worried about the future. After that, Gloriana often came to our house to hang out. She would casually open our fridge and eat ice cream, drink cola, and munch on the table snacks. My daughter and I were dumbfounded, but we hesitated to complain, fearing it would come back to us 100-fold. Eventually, my son moved out and started living on his own. Was it Gloriana who told him to live alone? Certainly for her, living alone would make it easier to meet than living with his family. One day, as I placed a sheet of paper on the table and picked up my brush, my daughter asked, "What's this month's quote?" I used to write an inspiring quote every month and hang it on the wall. I wrote all at once. "Be gentle as a spring breeze with people, and like a lion king against evil." Gloriana peeked in and exclaimed, "No way, that's incredibly good! You could be a pro, Mom!" My daughter quickly glared at Gloriana with a scowl. She is a pro. "Are you like a Japanese teacher or something?" "She's a calligrapher. You know, calligraphy. She's an instructor." "I know that much. It's calligraphy, right?" I was pleased with my daughter's desire to show off that her mother was an important person, but Gloriana didn't seem to listen much. I was forced to do it a bit in elementary school for cultural exchange, but I hated it. The teachers were so picky about the strokes. I wanted to throw ink on their heads. Gloriana's handwriting is bad, so you should learn from Mom. I think my son meant it casually, but at that moment, Gloriana glared at him with devilish, scary eyes and scolded him in a low voice. If you say something stupid again, a dropkick won't be enough. Don't get so mad. Gloriana laughed loudly, looking at the ceiling while watching TV. To put it nicely, she was powerful and hardy. To put it badly, she lacked grace. No, she was unreasonable, rude, rough, and crude, and I couldn't see her as the suitable wife for my son. I wanted to throw ink on her head. Gloriana was also overly familiar with my daughter Liddy. Liddy, you're so thin. Are you eating properly? Gloriana, have you ever thought about dieting? I was taken aback, but Gloriana continued the conversation with a smile. How old is Liddy? I'm 28. I'm 30. If you talk back to me like that, even though you're younger, I'll put you in a bulldogging headlock. Bulldog? Yeah, people often say I look like a bulldog. Are you picking a fight? She might have meant it as humor, but neither my daughter nor I found it funny. One day, I called Simon home alone, and the three of us had a serious talk. Brother, I'll be clear. I'm against your marriage to Gloriana. If that's what this is about, I'm leaving. This is important. I thought I could trust anyone Simon or Liddy brought home, but Gloriana is beyond unreasonable. That's not true. She has her good points. Brother, you can't say anything to Gloriana, can you? It's pathetic. I had intended to choose my words carefully, but Liddy was straightforward. If your girlfriend is rude to Mom, you should warn her, normally. You have to tell her to shut up if she complains. You don't know Gloriana, so you can say that. If I tell her to shut up, I'll be in the hospital in 2 seconds. I believe that a couple where the woman is stronger than the man is ideal, but Gloriana's strength is excessive. Marriage is not just a matter between two people. Both families become relatives. I had planned to treat Simon's wife like my own child, but honestly, I have 0% confidence in getting along with Gloriana. A heavy silence lingered until Simon suddenly stood up. What's this? Everyone's bad-mouthing Gloriana! Everyone? Does that mean your friends are against her too? Yeah, they're all terrible, saying things like, that's not right, and just practice with her. I couldn't help but think that his friends were right. A marriage blessed by many, including family and friends, is desirable. I wanted my son to reconsider, but he kept defending Gloriana. You don't even try to see her good side, just badmouth her. I'm fed up. We're not bad-mouthing her. Her parents are kind. They even welcome me warmly whenever I visit, treat me to expensive steaks, and even took me to a 3-star Michelin restaurant. Is that what you mean by kindness, brother? I was as astonished as Liddy, but my son ranted on. Compared to her house, being at home is painful. If all we can do is have depressing conversations like this, I won't come anymore. It seemed that Simon couldn't keep a secret from Gloriana, and he had told her that my daughter and I were against the marriage. Gloriana came storming into the house with my son. I never dreamed that both mother and daughter would be bad-mouthing me. We're not bad-mouthing you. You're not the ones getting married, so stop interfering. Her tone became rough, and I thought this must be her true nature. Gloriana started to pick on Simon, too. It's your fault for not speaking up properly! When Gloriana needed my child's body, I finally yelled, Stop it! People change when they meet someone of the opposite sex. Sometimes for the better, sometimes for the worse. Did I make a mistake in raising my son? I don't remember spoiling him. The teenage and 20s are times to train the mind and body, so I didn't indulge him. If you grow up without knowing hardship when you're young and remain weak-hearted, you'll complain, even in a privileged environment. A strong-hearted person can thrive even when adversity is a daily occurrence. I wanted to raise a strong child, but Simon is weak. Gloriana complained to Liddy and me one-sidedly and left Simon behind. When Liddy started blaming Simon, he lost his temper. A guy who takes his mother's side when his mother and girlfriend fight is the worst, isn't he? That's not good. That's not true. You don't care about how I feel. Caught in the middle. Enough already. Simon left too, and we didn't see him for a while. Then one day, something I never imagined happened. A postcard in the mailbox. It was printed with, "We got married," and there was a photo of Simon and Gloriana, smiling and arm in arm. Had they finally married? I thought they must have had a ceremony just for the two of them and decided to at least send a congratulatory card as a parent. The postcard strangely didn't include the address of their new home. I called my son. When I talked to Simon, I learned that they hadn't held the ceremony just by themselves. He said they had a grand wedding with Gloriana's parents, relatives, friends, Simon's friends, and colleagues. I felt weak all over, and my knees began to tremble. "Do you realize what you've done?" "If you're going to lecture me, I'll hang up." Without letting me know, they held the ceremony without inviting any relatives from the groom's side. Images of my relatives flashed before me, and I felt sad. I can't explain why I didn't invite them to Simon's wedding, and I can't face them anymore. Didn't Gloriana's parents object, thinking it was too much? An unreasonable child from unreasonable parents. Something inside me began to crumble. Then Gloriana came on the phone. "Put your hands on your chest and think hard about why you weren't invited to the wedding. But I'll take the card. I want to bring wedding and moving gifts to your new home, so please tell me the address." "I won't give personal information to a fake mother." An unbelievable line came from my son's wife's mouth, and I was speechless, my mind made up. Even when I asked, "Are you sure you won't regret this?" she replied with a mocking voice, "No way." Well then, it can't be helped. I'm not a weak woman who will cower at being spoken to like this. Put my son on. "If you're going to lecture, forget it." "Put my son on now!" When I yelled loudly, Gloriana yelled back. "Don't act tough on the phone! If you yell again, I'll headbutt you!" "Hello? I have something important to talk about, so come home." "If it's depressing, I don't want to hear it." "I have to give you the congratulatory card." "A card?" Hearing about the congratulatory card, my son said, "I'll come," and I felt even more pitiful. Since Simon might get angry and leave if he had to face Liddy's rapid-fire words, I talked to him alone. I wanted Simon and Liddy to become strong-minded people, so I didn't indulge them or allow selfishness during their teenage and 20s. "Enough with old stories. Where's the gift?" "Since your father worked hard, I was able to save most of the money I earned from calligraphy." Simon's eyes sparkled as the conversation turned to money. "I lived frugally and saved money, planning to surprise you with a large sum when you got married." Simon's smile grew, and he leaned forward. "I saved $100,000 for you." My son's eyes widened in surprise, and he shouted with joy. $100,000? "But you did something unthinkable by holding a wedding without telling your real mother." "What?" "In my common sense, that's something that should never happen. So, you're no longer my son. You're a stranger. It would be rude to give a stranger such a large gift, so I decline." My son stood frozen with his mouth open for a few seconds, then burst into tears and ranted. "What are you talking about, stranger? Give me the $100,000! My only child is my daughter Liddy. Please leave." "Wait, Gloriana said she didn't want to invite you." "That's why you should only care about your new family." My firm attitude and cold voice left Simon flustered. "The conversation is over. Please leave." "Stop talking like that! Are you saying you're cutting ties between parent and child?" "Holding a wedding without telling me means you've already cut those ties, doesn't it?" "No. No, no!" No matter what my husband said, I wouldn't forgive him. "It's always been like this! Liddy, Liddy, Liddy! You always favor her!" "I only have one child, so what do you mean by favoritism?" Simon ran out of the house, crying and screaming. As planned, I moved from the apartment to a newly built house and lived comfortably with Liddy. Without meeting Gloriana, there was no stress. However, one day when I returned from shopping, Simon was in front of the house. "I was surprised, moving to such a fine house. It looks sturdy and earthquake-resistant." "Did you follow me?" "Please stop with the formal language. Give me the $100,000. It's not fair to favor only your sister." "I have nothing to say to a stranger like you. Please leave." Then Liddy came home. "Brother? You brought this on yourself. Reflect on it a little. Not that I'll forgive you, even if you do. You plan to take $200,000, including my share? You're 35 and still expecting money from your parents? Don't you get it? Liddy's words were harsh. I intervened, fearing Simon might get angry. You chose this path. You chose your wife over your mother and sister. Holding a wedding in silence means just that. As Simon hung his head, unable to argue, a taxi pulled up and Gloriana got out, shouting, I wasn't invited, but I came. I thought you were being manipulated by your toxic mother and sister. Gloriana ranted at Liddy and me like a machine gun. Moving without telling your family? That's unbelievable. Family? I looked back, then at Gloriana and Simon again. Who's talking about whose family? Oh, you're going that way. Turning around dramatically to say you're talking to the wall, not me. You've watched too many movies, but I don't mind that kind of timing. You said it. You called me a fake mother, so I have no intention of giving wedding or moving gifts to a fake son and a fake daughter. Nitpicking, huh? If you nitpick, I'll counter with a neck chop before a dragon screw. You won't catch me with wordplay. I couldn't hold back and yelled. Speak seriously when talking about important matters. I warned you about yelling, or are you less intelligent than a crow? I'll call the police. Hearing the word police, Gloriana seemed a bit frightened, but didn't give up. Anyway, we'll take the $100,000. With that, Simon and Gloriana left. I was disappointed by their desire for the $100,000, not because they wanted to keep family ties. It's a common plot in dramas, where the mother eventually gives in to emotion and hands over the money to her son. But that would never be for my son's benefit. If one goes astray, family should help, but if the spoiled thinking isn't cured, the same mistakes will surely be repeated. I had a strong resolve not to give even a single dollar. I want to treat good citizens with the gentleness and freshness of a spring breeze. But against evil, a spring breeze won't protect those dear to me. Against evil, against enemies, I must face them like a lion. My policy is to respond sincerely to sincere people, but to respond with strength to arrogant ones. The boomerang effect is scary. Given her attitude, Gloriana may have hurt many people in her life. Gloriana's parents seem to be on the brink of divorce. My son informed me, but it's none of our business. Gloriana's father, who seems to be 60, my age, had an affair with a woman 20 years younger. He had an inappropriate relationship with a female employee for years, and it seems his wife found out. Gloriana and her father argued during a marital fight, and her father ended up in the hospital. I was surprised that Simon's previous words were not a metaphor. She really did hit him. One night, Simon came crying. What do you need? I apologize for everything so far. Please help me. Help with what? Despite it being night, Simon raised his voice. Family helps each other when in trouble, right? Your voice is loud. It's a nuisance to the neighbors. Sure enough, a neighbor was looking out the window, so I reluctantly let Simon in. Gloriana and my father were arguing, and when my father slapped Gloriana, she unbelievably countered with a German suplex. German? You wouldn't think Gloriana could do such a vivid bridge with that body, normally. Liddy slammed the table with a bang, angry. Speak seriously when you're asking for something serious. I'm not joking, I'm just flustered. I don't know much about wrestling, so I don't know what a German suplex is, but I understood that Simon was confused. My father hit the back of his head and is now hospitalized. He's lying about falling down the stairs, but the doctor is suspicious. You have to tell the doctor this is an assault case. Please stop! After holding his head in his hands, my son spoke softly. If my father can't work, our finances will be tight. Neither my mother nor Gloriana work, and my meager salary can't support us. Then you must get Gloriana to work, quickly, though I worry if any company would hire her. Even with the sarcasm towards Gloriana, Simon didn't get angry, but bowed his head. Mom, I don't need $100,000. Just give me $10,000, please. It's impossible. When I answered without hesitation, Simon said, Understood. I'll bring Gloriana, and she'll apologize. That won't happen. I'll make her apologize. If my son could make Gloriana apologize, I thought I might reconsider, my parental feelings getting the better of me. The next day, Simon really brought Gloriana. Gloriana, probably acting, looked solemn, bowed her head. Please forgive my rudeness until now. Lies! Did you think you were being rude? For a moment, Gloriana glared at Liddy, but quickly hung her head. Please, help our family. I beg you. I refuse. I answered immediately, and Simon's face turned pale. Mom! As Gloriana tried to kneel, I spoke first. It's useless to grovel on the floor. Ignoring Gloriana's trembling humiliation, I said, when dealing with someone who's lived for 60 years, it's important not to underestimate them without knowing what hardships they've been through. Gloriana looked up at me. Did I look like just a gentle calligraphy teacher to you? Even if you claim to be a mafia woman, I won't be intimidated. Gloriana! I smiled wryly. A mafia woman? What a lack of imagination. It's not about that. I'm a patient person, but once I decide not to forgive, I can be utterly cold-hearted. Understand? Isn't family supposed to help each other in times of trouble? Liddy shook her head in disbelief. Gloriana, you crossed the line you shouldn't have. Please leave. Realizing she wouldn't be forgiven, Gloriana lashed out at Simon. It's your fault for having zero persuasiveness and credibility. It's your fault for not being patient. You promised to endure whatever was said. Take it outside. You're unbearable. Cold-hearted sister. You should have given her a pile driver on the concrete, not on the carpet. Feeling threatened, Simon ran out of the house, and Gloriana chased after him. I didn't stop them. I heard my son's screams from outside, but I ignored them. Simon apparently divorced Gloriana, and Gloriana's parents also divorced. Truly a family torn apart. My heart ached. If I laughed at others' tragedies, I wouldn't escape the boomerang effect either. My son came to the house again, but I spoke to him at the entrance and didn't let him in. This is hard to say, but can I live here with you? It's impossible. Simon hung his head at my immediate response. Indulging him now would be meaningless. After that, I heard nothing from Simon. Days like a storm continued, but now both Liddy and I enjoy clear skies every day. One day, Liddy said she would bring her current boyfriend over, and I felt a pang of anxiety. If her boyfriend turned out to be another rude and unreasonable man, I would feel it was fate. However, the young man my daughter brought was sensible and decent. I breathed a sigh of relief.
Ma'am, we found your soaked child in the park. It was 1 a.m. on a stormy night when a police officer suddenly showed up at my door. I was totally confused. After all, my 2-year-old daughter was peacefully sleeping in her bed. The officer had with him a little girl, around 4 years old, wearing tattered clothes and looking frail. She stared at me trembling with tears in her eyes. The officer showed me a note the girl was clutching and had my name and address written on it. Could it be? I suddenly hugged the little girl, and a flood of memories rushed back into my mind. I am Susan, a 33-year-old housewife. I live with my husband Michael, who is the same age, and our 2-year-old daughter Sarah. We have a happy life together, but I have a past I'd rather not remember. It was 5 years ago. I got married for the first time when I was 28. My husband was Joseph, my boss at the company where I worked. Joseph was a generous mentor, and I admired his confidence and his ability to put people at ease. When he asked me out, I dated him for about 6 months and happily accepted his marriage proposal. My family also seemed to have a good impression of him. In particular, my sister Lisa, who is 5 years younger than me, was thrilled to have a great brother-in-law. Joseph even told me. I was surprised he had such a beautiful and cute sister. Lisa was indeed adorable, both in looks and personality. When we were little, she would always follow me around saying, "Susan, I love you." We were really close sisters. After getting married to Joseph, Lisa started coming over to our new home more frequently. Joseph is so mature. I really look up to him. The guys around me are just kids in comparison. I'm flattered that a cute girl like you, Lisa, would compliment me. I felt uneasy watching Lisa grow fond of Joseph and my husband seeming to enjoy the attention, but my intuition eventually proved correct. One day, they both vanished, hand in hand. They left behind a note saying, "Susan, I'm sorry," along with filled-out divorce papers. Life can be dramatic, but who really goes through something like having their husband and sister fall in love? Why couldn't they have just been honest with me? I would have been willing to let Lisa have Joseph. If I could utterly despise them, maybe it would be easier. But in my case, that wasn't how I felt. I filed for divorce immediately, ending my brief marriage within a year. The one who saved me from the depths of despair after being betrayed by my loving husband and sister was my current husband, Michael. We had originally met in a college club. Michael proposed to me 3 years ago after supporting me through my recovery, and we remarried. Our daughter Sarah was born, and life had been peaceful. Then, it happened. Suddenly, at 1 a.m., our doorbell rang incessantly. Despite a raging hurricane outside, I got out of bed after patting my sleeping daughter's head, wondering what on earth was going on. With my husband away on business, I peeked outside cautiously and found a police officer standing there. "We found your soaking wet child in a nearby park." "What? My daughter is sleeping in her bed right now." "That's strange. The child has a note with your name and this address. Could you please open the door to confirm?" When I opened the door, standing there were the police officer and a skinny, drenched little girl about 4 years old. She was dressed in tattered clothes. The note she clutched read, "Please take care of this child," and the handwriting looked familiar. I couldn't help but kneel down and take her icy cold hand. Tears filled her eyes as she stared at me and shivered. This girl is... Suddenly I hugged her tightly. Memories flooded back to me. I used to hug my younger sister Lisa, who was 5 years my junior, just like this. The child was the spitting image of Lisa, and there was no mistaking that the handwriting on the note was hers. I told the police, "This child is likely my sister's." But what was such a small child doing alone in the park in the middle of the night? "What's your name?" "Jennifer." "Jennifer? Why were you in the park?" "I came to this house with Mom, then Mom disappeared, so I was looking for her." Young Jennifer couldn't explain any further. Worried, Jennifer shivers every time the howling wind and rain intensify. I softly assure her, "She's soaked. If I don't get her into a warm bath and change her clothes, she'll catch a cold." I had some larger clothes a friend had given me, which their kids had outgrown. I got those ready for her. While I'm helping Jennifer out of her clothes in the bathroom, I let out an involuntary gasp. Unbelievably, her body has multiple bruises as if she's been pinched and slapped. My heart tightens thinking what she's been through with such a small body. To top it off, she's wearing a handmade charm hanging from her chest over her undershirt. Curious as I am about it, I put it aside for now and get her into the bath. After the bath, when I comb her hair and dress her in clean clothes, Jennifer looks remarkably refreshed and adorable. She's thin, but she strongly resembles my sister Lisa when she was young. I'm convinced Jennifer is Lisa's daughter. I took her into bed, wrap her in a blanket, and hug her. "Rest easy. Good night," I say. She murmurs, "So warm," and, reassured, falls deeply asleep. The next morning, while Jennifer and Sarah are still sleeping, my mobile phone rings. An unknown number. Cautiously, I answer. No one speaks, but I can hear faint breathing. "Lisa, is that you?" "No, it's me, Joseph. Long time. Glad your number hasn't changed, Susan." "It's my ex-husband, Joseph." "What do you want now?" "Strange question, but are you taking care of a girl?" I hesitate, but feign ignorance, recalling last night. "What are you talking about?" "How's Lisa?" Joseph avoids answering and hangs up, saying, "Never mind then." In truth, after Jennifer had gone to sleep, I'd opened the charm and found a letter inside. It read, "Susan, I'm sorry, I know I can't ask for favors now, but please take care of my daughter, Jennifer." Additionally, the letter had shocking revelations that left me trembling with anger. It also provided the location of the bar where my sister works, so I decided to go meet her. I'll leave Sarah and Jennifer with my mom at our family home. Seeing Jennifer, my mom softly holds her and says, "She looks just like Lisa," tears filling her eyes. A week ago, Lisa suddenly called. She said she wanted to apologize in person and asked for your address. So that's how she found me. I had my reservations, but she seemed desperate and kept insisting, so I reluctantly agreed. I'm sorry. You did nothing wrong, Mom. Thanks to you, I might be able to help Lisa. What? I'm entrusting these kids to you for that reason. So I left my family home and headed to the bar where Lisa works. It was only a 30-minute taxi ride away. Why didn't she ask for help sooner if she lived so close? I guess Lisa felt she couldn't rely on me no matter how tough things got. The bar was in a quiet corner of the entertainment district. Inside, it was dimly lit and smelled of alcohol and cigarettes. When I asked someone who looked like the owner about Lisa, he called for her right away. Stumbling from the back of the bar, Lisa appeared. The once plump and pretty Lisa I remember was gone. She looked skinny, worn out, and had a sickly complexion. I was lost for words. Lisa, who was still in her 20s, looked like a worn-out woman in her 40s or 50s. "Is that you, Lisa?" "Yeah, Susan, I'm sorry." After she finished saying this, Lisa stumbled and collapsed into my arms. That's when the owner coldly said, "She's not feeling well and can't work. Take her home." Seeing his attitude, I could easily imagine the harsh treatment Lisa had been getting here. I immediately took Lisa to the nearest hospital. The doctor diagnosed her with a severe illness, saying she came too late and doesn't have much time left. Lisa was immediately admitted. Overwhelmed by the news, I returned home and told my mom, who broke down crying. I, too, couldn't hold back my tears anymore. "I'll take care of Jennifer, Mom. Let's support Lisa together." "Yes, I'll do everything I can." Having made this promise with Mom, I took Jennifer and Sarah home. My husband Michael, who returned from a business trip that night, was shocked to see one more child in the house. When I discussed Jennifer with him, he said, "Let's pray for Lisa's recovery. In the meantime, Jennifer can stay with us." The next day, when we took Jennifer to visit her mom in the hospital, she ran up to Lisa crying. "Mom, I've missed you." "Jennifer, I'm sorry. Are you okay?" "Yeah, I'm fine. Aunt Susan is really nice." Tears in her eyes, Lisa lovingly stroked Jennifer's hair. My sister thanked me and gave me something to help protect Jennifer. From then on, Jennifer stayed with us and we occasionally took her to see Lisa in the hospital. After about 10 days, Jennifer, who had been so frail, started to look healthier and even smiled a bit. She grew fond of Sarah, almost as if they had been sisters forever. Just when I was happily watching the two of them play, I got a call from my mom back home. "Joseph just showed up at the house," she said. "I am demanding to know where Lisa and Jennifer are. Hand them over right now." "I got scared and gave him your address. I'm sorry. Get out of there before he finds you." I was hurriedly getting the kids ready to leave when the doorbell rang multiple times. Could it be Joseph already? I peered outside and sure enough, there he was, face red with anger. Seeing him like this, something in me snapped. Despite Lisa withering away, Joseph looked like he'd put in weight, even getting chubby. I opened the door and Joseph immediately started accusing me. "Heard you got remarried and live in a nice house, enjoying the high life, huh?" "That's none of your business," I retorted. "I know Lisa and Jennifer are here. Bring them out now." "Even if they are, I can't hand them over to you." "I need Lisa to work or we don't have money. Bring her out." At that moment, Jennifer burst out and screamed, "I hate you, Dad. You always bullied Mom." "What did you say, you little brat?" Joseph tried to slap Jennifer, but I immediately stepped in between. "Lisa is in the hospital because of you. She's sick because you forced her to work and didn't allow her to get medical treatment." I had read about Joseph's recent behavior in a letter from Lisa that was inside the charm Jennifer was wearing. When Lisa got pregnant, she and Joseph left home together. Soon after Jennifer was born, they were broke and struggling. Joseph then began verbally abusing Lisa and Jennifer, saying, "This is all your fault." He took all the money Lisa earned from her job at a bar and squandered it on gambling and fun. They were left without even food. Eventually, the stress piled up and Lisa fell ill, but they had no money for medical care. My sister had written, "I won't be able to raise Jennifer if things keep going like this. At least I want to save our child." So she thought it would be best to entrust this matter to me. However, when Joseph heard it, far from showing remorse, he spat out foul words. "Lisa and Jennifer are to blame for everything. They ruined my life. It's only right that they make amends. I don't know what sort of life you've been leading, but you've brought all this upon yourself. It's all your own doing." "No, Lisa came on to me. I had no choice but to get involved. It's all her fault." "You got to be kidding me. You're the adult here, and you took advantage of a young girl like Lisa. You've done terrible things to my sister and Jennifer. I'll have you prosecuted." "You have no proof. Still think so after seeing this?" I showed Joseph pictures of Jennifer covered in bruises as well as medical reports saying Lisa also had bruises all over her body. Joseph's face changed for a moment, but he soon began to taunt me again. "See? Women are so foolish. Who's to say who caused those bruises? Especially with Jennifer. It could have been her mother." "You're a despicable man. I have more evidence. Take a look at this." I showed him a mobile phone entrusted to me by Lisa. The phone contained audio clips of Joseph spewing abuse and committing acts of violence, providing ample evidence. Suddenly, Joseph lunged at me, trying to snatch the phone away. "Stop it. What are you doing?" At that moment, Michael and the police arrived, raising their voices and pulling Joseph's grabbing hand away from me. Actually, right after receiving a call from my mother, I had contacted my husband and the police. "Joseph, what you've done to my sister and Jennifer is unforgivable. I'll be handing all the evidence over to the police. You better reflect on your actions." Joseph was immediately taken away in a police car. Michael looked at me with a mix of disbelief and concern, letting out a sigh. "You should have waited for me. What you did was reckless. I'm sorry, I just couldn't stand Joseph anymore." "Are you hurt?" As he said this, looking me over for injuries, I felt so grateful that I had married this man. That night, we got a call from the hospital. Lisa's condition had suddenly worsened and she was critical. I rushed there with Jennifer. Lisa was barely breathing, but still conscious. "Hang in there. Joseph is arrested now. You're safe." "Susan, I'm sorry. I messed up." "Don't say that. I'm the one who introduced you to that horrible man. This isn't your fault, Lisa." "Thank you. Please take care of Jennifer." "Don't worry. I'll look after her until you get better. You need to hang on." Jennifer gripped Lisa's hand tightly, tears streaming down her face. "Mom, Jennifer, I'm sorry. I'll be watching over you from the sky. Be a good girl." "Mom, I'll be good. I want to be with you. Mom, Jennifer." And with that, Lisa lost consciousness. My sister passed away quietly the next day. Our prayers went unanswered. If I had stayed with Joseph, my daughter and I might have faced a similar fate. I wonder if Lisa became my stand-in. I can't shake that feeling. After the trial, Joseph was sentenced to prison. My parents filed for compensation and child support from Joseph. His parents apologized for their son's actions and offered to cover the costs. They promised to make him work to pay them back after his release. Jennifer chose to live with us, so we plan to adopt her. The compensation and child support will be saved for her future. Now, Sarah looks up to Jennifer like a real sister. Seeing them together reminds me of my own sister and me when we were young. I'm committed to supporting both of them as they grow up.
I cleaned up your room, Lara. It was a mess. Emerging from my room with a smug grin on her face was Sherry, my son's wife. "Oh, thank you. I had just cleaned my room a few days ago, but maybe it still looked messy to someone else. I decided to just thank her for now. Sherry, my son's wife, never lifts a finger around the house. She's always snarky and throws tantrums when things don't go her way. So her cleaning my room, that's suspicious to say the least. I don't know what you're up to, but it won't work. I muttered quietly, making sure Sherry, who was watching TV at high volume, couldn't hear me. Then I went back to my chores. I've put up with a lot from her, and my patience is wearing thin. I've warned her before, but if she continues to act this way, she'll have to face the consequences. My name is Lara, and I'm 73 years old. I met my husband Frank at a social event. We were both shy at first, but now we enjoy our evening coffee chats. After we got married, I became pregnant with our son George. Frank was thrilled and helped me with chores, even though he was clumsy. Once George moved out for work, our lively home became quiet, and we felt a bit lonely. Then George brought home Sherry, his then girlfriend. Frank and I thought she was beautiful and well-mannered. Sherry looked dazzling as she sat on the sofa with her long black hair tied up and her back straight. My husband and I talked a lot with Sherry, leaving George alone because he was too nervous to understand what he was saying. We liked her so much that we encouraged George to marry her quickly, which they did. Life got busy again, with their honeymoon and moving to a new place, but we enjoyed it. We were disappointed when they decided not to have children, but we understood. We thought peaceful days were ahead, but we were wrong. They kept coming back home for trivial reasons. Whether it was a broken air conditioner in the summer or unpaid electric bills in the winter, they'd stay with us but leave all the work to us. At first we felt sorry for them, but it became increasingly annoying. Frank, who once welcomed them warmly, now gets stressed just seeing them. As for George, he's as oblivious as ever, acting like he can do whatever he wants. My son and daughter-in-law decided to come visit us out of the blue. George called me last week and said, "Hey Mom, we're coming over next week, just a heads up." Then he went radio silent, leaving me in the dark about when exactly they'd arrive. Then, just as suddenly, I got a message from Sherry saying, "We'll be there soon, so get ready." I had to scramble to prepare everything. Frank said, "You handle the bedding and clothes. I'll go buy the groceries we're missing. If you could jot down a shopping list, that'd be neat. That'd be great." Then he went to change. I thanked him and quickly wrote down the ingredients for tonight's dinner, placing the note on the living room table. Then I started airing out the guest futon. When I returned to the living room, Frank was looking at the note. "Is this everything? If you remember anything else, just text me and I'll pick it up." He left with a smile, and I couldn't help but smile back. Just as I was about to get the clothes, I heard a loud voice from the entrance. "Lara, are you there?" Sherry was calling out to me from the front door without even ringing the doorbell. I rushed to open it. "Come on, you knew we were coming. Why didn't you leave the door open?" Sherry complained as she walked in. When she heard that, she instantly wrinkled her eyebrows and complained. "What's the matter? It's rude not to be happy when someone comes to visit," she retorted. I held my tongue and welcomed her in. "Where's George?" I asked, noticing his absence. "Oh, Frank snagged him for grocery shopping." I was a bit annoyed by her nonchalant attitude, but decided to let it go and continued with my preparations. Sherry didn't lift a finger to help. She just sat there, eating her own snacks and occasionally laughing at the TV. After a while, she suddenly stood up and left the living room. I assumed she went to the bathroom and didn't think much of it, but when she returned, she looked pleased. "Lara, your room was a mess, so I cleaned it up for you." I was taken aback. She had gone into my room without asking. I had questions, but decided to thank her anyway. She grinned and plopped back down on the sofa. Just then, Frank and George returned. I had asked Frank to buy quite a lot, knowing that the young couple would be staying for a few days. Frank had apparently enlisted George as his pack mule, and it looked like he had accomplished his mission. Frank handed me the groceries, stepping over a visibly exhausted George, who was still holding bags at the entrance. After saying thanks, I took out what I needed and started putting the rest away in the fridge.
"Hey, George, stop lounging and bring everything here."
Frank, who had just scolded George, still sitting by the entrance, pours himself some iced coffee and heads to the living room. George looked a bit annoyed, eventually brings in all the bags in a few trips.
"Man, I'm beat. Mom, pour me some iced coffee too." "Do it yourself."
Frank scolds George again for his whiny tone, but I prepare the coffee with a wry smile. "Welcome back. Thank you. Dinner will be ready soon, so just wait a bit."
All right.
George says as he takes the iced coffee and heads to the living room. He sits next to Sherry and gulps down his drink. I continued preparing dinner, but Sherry doesn't offer to help. Not that I expected her to. In fact, I'd rather she didn't. She might mess something up. Eventually, dinner is ready, and we all eat. It's a simple spaghetti meal, but no complaints from George or Sherry, so it's all good. After dinner, the room had that relaxed post-meal atmosphere. Frank and the young couple are watching TV. No conversation, but that's better than the alternative. I leave the living room to get their change of clothes. On my way, I run into Frank, who's just come out of the shower. Should I offer George the shower first?
"I can go last."
"Oh, you've been out shopping. I can't make you wait." I enter the living room laughing, to find George dozing off. "George, don't sleep here. Go take a shower."
"Stop nagging."
George replies listlessly. I place his change of clothes on him and hand Sherry hers. Sherry takes the clothes, but quickly pushes them back with a frown. "I like the ones I wore before. They weren't this flimsy." I'm taken aback by Sherry's complaint, but arguing would only escalate things. "Oh, is that so? Wait a moment." As I go look for the other clothes, George, uninterested in the whole affair, yawns and heads to the shower. While searching, Frank pops his head in.
"Do you know where my golf balls are?"
"Aren't they next to the closet where you usually hang your coat and bag?"
"I can't find them."
Puzzled, I watch Frank leave and then go to Sherry with new clothes. "Ah, this is it. You get what you pay for." Yes, these clothes I bought when Sherry and I went shopping specifically for when they stay over. Sherry had insisted on something expensive, and I had given in. "I'll shower next. I don't want to go after an old person." Just as I'm about to retort, Frank returns, looking concerned. "Still can't find them?"
"Yeah. Sherry, do you know where the bag of golf balls next to the coat closet is?"
Frank, seemingly at a loss after searching everywhere, decided to ask around, not expecting much of an answer. What he got was a shock. "I have no idea what you're talking about. Are you accusing me of stealing? That's terrible. How could you suspect me?" Sherry's loud denial left me stunned. Frank tried to explain it was a misunderstanding, but an irate Sherry wouldn't hear it. George, freshly showered, returned, and we all tried to calm her down, but she stormed off to the shower room still in a bad mood. The living room fell silent, filled with tension.
"What just happened?"
George asked Frank, noting that it's rare for Sherry to be this flustered. But why did she really get so angry? I couldn't help but suspect Sherry based on her usual behavior.
"Come on, Dad, apologize. You're practically accusing her."
Before I knew it, George and Frank were arguing. It took me quite a while to break it up. Just then, Sherry returned from her shower, making things even more complicated. Now Frank was the one being grilled by the young couple, but Frank didn't back down, especially when he scolded Sherry for her behavior today. She stormed off to the guest room. George continued to yell, blocking Frank, who tried to follow her.
You keep blaming Sherry, but you haven't apologized for suspecting her. You never apologize. That's what I hate about you.
Fed up, Frank muttered,
Do as you please,
and returned to his room. The living room fell silent again. I sighed and headed for the shower.
I'm going to bed,
George said curtly. Heading for the guest room, I stopped him. The guest futon smells musty, George. Sleep in my room. Sherry when Frank and George went shopping, and Sherry overreacting to Frank's words. It just seemed suspicious to me, so I started to think that she was planning something by saying she had cleaned my room. So I decided to let George use my room, which was supposed to be for Sherry.
Your room? I'm fine with a little mustiness. I'm not a kid anymore.
What if you get pneumonia?
See, that's what I mean. Fine, I get it.
George seemed annoyed, but gave in and headed to my room. I glanced at the guest room Sherry was using. She wouldn't know about this exchange, being in a bad mood. If nothing's wrong, that's fine. I planned to prepare the guest room for George tomorrow. George opened the door to my room and went in.
Whoa! What the?
I heard George scream and rushed to my room, flinging open the half-closed door. I turned on the light and was speechless. George was in the room, clutching his leg in pain, surrounded by a scattering of golf balls. The golf balls Frank had been looking for were strewn all over my room. In a pitch-black room, George must have stepped on it. Of course he did. Who would ever think there'd be golf balls scattered all over the room? George lost his balance, stepping on one, tried to regain it, but ended up putting his weight in the wrong place and fell. It seemed like he hit the floor hard with his entire body. He's clutching his leg and whimpering, tears streaming down his face. Hearing the commotion, both Frank and Sherry came out of their rooms. Frank peered into the room from behind me and said,
What's going on here?
As he tried to help George up. But Frank also tripped on a golf ball and almost fell just like George. I turned around. There stood Sherry, pale as a ghost, trembling. Why is this happening? This is Lara's room. Her voice was so soft, it could have been drowned out by Frank's urgent questioning of George. Yes, this is my room. Speaking of which, Sherry, you cleaned this room today, didn't you? At my words, Frank and George turned around, and Sherry took a step back, flustered. Did you see these golf balls when you cleaned? I asked gently. Sherry just stood there, shaking. Sherry, do you know anything about these golf balls? Still Sherry remained silent.
Hey, Sherry, what's going on? Answer me.
George, losing his patience, raised his voice. But he's clearly in pain from the fall. I didn't know you'd be coming into this room. Reluctantly, Sherry backed away, shaking her head. Frank muttered,
We have no choice but to call an ambulance and the police.
At those words, Sherry collapsed on the spot, sobbing. I immediately called an ambulance and the police and checked on George. He was sitting clutching his leg, struggling to breathe, his face red with anger. He answered my questions, but his eyes were filled with anger toward Sherry. Eventually the ambulance arrived, and I accompanied George to the hospital. After an examination, it was determined that George had fractured the top of his foot and would need to be hospitalized. By the time we got to the hospital, his foot was swollen and bruised, almost too painful to look at. The nurses and doctors advised reporting the incident to the police, clearly displeased with the situation. I said I would and stepped out to call Frank. Frank answered and told me the police had arrived and were currently taking statements. The call was handed over to the police officer, who said they would like to hear the full story later, to which I agreed. According to Frank, Sherry was just sitting on the floor, unresponsive to anyone or anything. After hanging up, I returned to George's hospital room, received instructions for his hospital stay, and decided to go home to gather some essentials. When I got back home, there was a crowd gathered around, making it difficult to get in. Finally, making it inside the house, Sherry immediately started to lash out. "Why wasn't it you? Why did George go into that room? If you had gone in, none of this would have happened to George." Breaking free from the police officer's restraint, Sherry lunged at me. "It should have been you. You're already old. If you had fallen, this house and this land would have been mine soon." Sherry, spewing hateful words with a ferocity that felt like she could bite me, was pulled away by Frank and the police. Still, she continued to hurl insults at me, struggling to break free and lunge at me again. And then Sherry was finally arrested. Suddenly, silent as if a switch had been flipped, she was escorted out of the house by the police. She was put into a police car and taken away, drawing the attention of many onlookers. Left behind, Frank and I stood there, stunned, watching the whole sequence of events unfold. Snapped back to reality by the police officer, I briefly answered their questions, and then headed back to the hospital with the essentials George needed. When I got to the hospital room, no nurses or doctors were around. After hearing about the situation at home, George, who had forgotten about his severe injuries, started making a commotion. A nurse rushed in, and we managed to calm him down.
"I've been suspicious of her for a while. The way she sometimes looks at Mom bothers me. I've been meaning to say something."
Despite what he said, I'd never sensed any such thing from George, nor did it seem like he'd noticed. Rather, he always seemed to avoid getting involved in troublesome matters. George has always been the type to say whatever sounds good to get through the moment. This time was probably no different. I was utterly exasperated.
"Hey, Mom, I've been thinking for a while now."
George, who had been ranting just moments ago, suddenly lowered his voice. Curiously, I asked what it was.
"I'm thinking of breaking up with Sherry."
I was surprised, but considering everything, it wasn't unreasonable. I don't know how Sherry acts when it's just her and George, but her behavior during visits has been terrible. She acts as if she's entitled to special treatment, refuses to help out, and throws tantrums if things don't go her way. We've never liked her, but we never thought about forcing George to divorce her. We've never been fans of her behavior, that's for sure. But that doesn't mean we ever thought about pushing George to divorce her. We never asked George what he thought about Sherry, and it felt wrong to even consider it. After all, George is an adult, and it's not our place to meddle in his marriage. Frank and I have even talked about staying out of it if George doesn't say anything. But now, George is coming to us for advice on divorce. I was at a loss for words.
"Mom, she's always been so harsh with you, and she's been rude to Dad too. I can't take it anymore."
That's when I felt something was off. Sure, Sherry has never held back her disdain for me. She doesn't even try to hide it, and I assume she acts the same way when it's just her and George. But she's indifferent to Frank. Frank is a gentle soul, but he's not much of a talker and has a stern face. That's probably why I've rarely seen them talk since they got married. So it felt odd when she got flustered after Frank asked about the golf ball incident. She usually just gives cold replies, but this time she raised her voice. She must have felt exposed by Frank.
"Do I have to pay alimony if we divorce? And there are hospital bills too. Can you help, Mom?"
That's when it clicked. George has been trying to butter me up for this very reason. It's heartbreaking, but George is my flesh and blood. I can read his expressions and gestures. I know what he's thinking. I've always found him adorable and couldn't help but meddle, but ever since he hit puberty, he's found it annoying. Like Sherry, George also resents us, but he's playing the good son for the sake of money. "Hey, George, What happened to the money for the car you said you were going to replace? The other day, when our son and his wife were visiting, my son said he was thinking about getting a new car and needed some financial help because it was a bit pricey. Obviously, if he mentioned this in front of Frank, he'd be met with opposition, so he discreetly came to me. I couldn't say no to my dear George, so I gave him the full amount. But the car he drove home in was the same one he had before. So you haven't bought it yet? If that's the case, you can use that money for the hospital bills. It might not cover alimony, but it'll help. But then what about the car? You can save up again once you're better. We have our own lives, you know. You're old enough to figure things out yourself. I'm pissed off. I was dumbfounded that George still expected financial help from us at this point. I left the hospital after saying just that. The truth is, I knew George had been squandering the money I gave him. Sherry had told me, though she was obviously benefiting from it too. I've always worried about him and meddled in his affairs, but it seems that has backfired. I took this as a good opportunity to tell Frank everything. After hearing me out, Frank said, I've been meaning to talk to you about this. He recently lost his job and is in considerable debt. I was shocked, and so was Frank, who had heard this while they were out shopping. At this point, there's nothing more to say to George. Frank and I decided to disown him. Some time has passed since then. Sherry is now in prison after being convicted in court, and it seems she divorced George before the trial began. But later I heard that it was Sherry who initiated the divorce. Apparently, they were both initially enjoying the money they'd gotten from me, but George started reducing Sherry's share until he stopped giving her any at all. That's why she did what she did in my room, thinking it would bring money her way. It's a terrifying thought. As for George, he seemed to cling to the idea of divorce once Sherry suggested it, and ultimately agreed. He's not burdened by much alimony, but he's drowning in the debt he created. Of course, the money for the car had long been gambled away. We covered his hospital bills, but he's working hard to pay off his other debts. It's a pathetic situation, but it's the result of his lifelong dependency. I hope he learns from this. As for Frank and me, the money we'd been giving George actually came from Frank. I didn't have that kind of money, but Frank loved George and wanted it to come from me. Now that's no longer an option. We're planning a hot spring trip we've never taken before. I do regret putting George through all this, but considering everything, it can't be helped. Now, the happiest moments are when Frank and I are looking at travel magazines.
My name is Linda. I'm in my 50s, leading a leisurely life, juggling a part-time job and hobbies. My husband, William, celebrated his 60th birthday this year and switched to a contract basis, continuing his work at his own pace. We have a 32-year-old son, Jack. Though his adolescence was a bit challenging, he now exhibits a sense of calm that's hard to believe. He's settled into his dream job and seems to be enjoying his single life living alone. And we have one more member of our family, my mother-in-law, Sue. Sue, who turned 90 this year, is spending her day in the sun, petting a cat on the porch. She's the very picture of a charming country granny. 3 years ago, I was saved by this Granny Sue, and I think I'll tell you that story. I'm bringing my fiancé home on Saturday. One spring day, we received such a call from our son, and William and I were over the moon. After all, we'd always wondered when our son, who was at the right age, would get married. Of course, it's enough for us if he is happy, even without getting married. Still, we, who are likely to pass away before him, can't help but wish someone to be by our only son's side. Linda, I can't find any socks without holes. Oh dear, William, look properly, and by the way, I prepared the macaroons for tea. What do you think? Macaroon? What's that? While we lead a rather casual life, we were bustling to make a good impression on the woman coming from the city. Meanwhile, my mother-in-law was leisurely drinking tea on the porch. Nice to meet you. My name is Nancy. The woman who came home with our son, Nancy, greeted us with a charming smile. The well-groomed black hair and white dress suited Nancy, who had a modest atmosphere, and we both had a good impression of her. Surrounded by the cake she brought us as a gift and macaroons, our first meeting went on peacefully. By the way, Jack isn't biologically related to you, right? Until Nancy started with that. Oh, you heard it from Jack. Yes, he has a different mother. It's a common question, so I answered as usual. His mother passed away when he was 3. I married Linda when Jack was 8. My husband William naturally explained. I'm his second wife. To our son Jack, I'm his stepmother. Oh, Jack, it must have been hard for you suddenly having a new mom. Nancy sympathized with Jack, a look of concern on her face. At her response, I found myself slightly taken aback, but Jack swiftly countered. No, it was more like my request. I told Dad, I want Linda to be my mom, so please marry her. That's right. Linda was always very good to Jack, and Jack opened up to her. That's why I decided to marry her. You're exaggerating. Originally, William and I had a boss-subordinate relationship at work. Since we lived close by, we naturally became close, often commuting together. I had many opportunities to meet young Jack. Being the eldest of 4 siblings, I loved playing with younger kids and had become close with Jack even before I did with William. Jack took a liking to me, and that's why I decided to marry William. That's true. Is that so? Nancy responded, sounding rather nonchalant despite bringing up the topic herself. She seemed to have her own pace. Where's Grandma? Jack, having finished his snacks, looked around. She's out on the porch. Just as usual. Grandma? Nancy inquired, tilting her head in curiosity. My grandma also lives here. She's a bit senile and is always basking in the sun. Oh. Say hello to her before you leave. Now, when are you planning to have the wedding? Nancy's eyes lit up as she replied. June 1st. Oh, it's coming soon. When did you two start dating? I added. Since last Christmas. Last Christmas? I found myself echoing her answer. Wait, so you haven't even been together for half a year? Is that a problem? Her previously twinkling eyes suddenly dimmed, which made me anxious. No, it's not like that. I think it's pretty quick. Any reason? William chimed in, covering up my panic. She wanted to have a wedding while she's still in her 20s. Oh, I see. I can understand that feeling. That's right. My parents also want me to get married quickly and have a child of their own blood. I see. There seemed to be an implication in her words. I wondered if I was the only one picking up on it. Well, you two are adults, so we won't interfere, but remember, both marriage and the ceremony are your responsibilities, okay? Yes, Jack nodded confidently. Nancy looked at him adoringly. I need to stop being so nervous about their young love and support them as a mother. Apparently, they had a hotel reservation for the evening, so they were leaving before dinner. Sue, Jack is leaving now, I said, tapping my mother-in-law, who was dozing off on the porch. How old is she? Nancy suddenly asked from behind me, causing me to jump. There stood Nancy, smiling sweetly. She just turned 87 this year. Oh, that's a relief then. Relief? What was she relieved about? Hey, old lady. Old lady? I was baffled by her transformation and being addressed as old lady. She was mocking my confusion. I have no intention of taking care of a stranger like you. Once you've seen us off, I'd like you to leave this house. Eh? You can attend the wedding, but know your place. Jack's too kind to say it, but I don't think he wants his stepmother pretending to be his real mother at his wedding. Nancy spouted venom and slowly approached me as if cornering me. Was her smile always this terrifying? Despite her eyes not smiling, her mouth curled unnaturally. Nancy, let's go. Jack's voice called from the entrance, and Nancy's face instantly brightened. Okay. Remember, old lady, I won't pamper you once I become Jack's wife, so be prepared. After whispering in my ear with a low voice, Nancy walked away with a spring in her step as if she was about to skip. Left behind, cold sweat trickled down my cheeks. I realized that Nancy had never once called me Linda, but kept addressing me as old lady, just like I'm a stranger. I couldn't sleep that night. My mind was in a whirl. The next morning, William noticed my pallid complexion. "What's wrong? You look down." "Do I? Feeling lonely because Jack is getting married?" "Yes, I am. He's the son I cherished and raised." "I'm sure Jack will often come home with grandchildren. His bride seems to be a good girl," William assured. "Yes, she does." Indeed, Nancy had not been harsh towards anyone but me, Jack's stepmother. I never expected her to take care of me, and I'm fine with Jack inheriting everything, but we never discussed this with Jack. I thought I'd established a relationship with him no different from any other parent and child. But what if Nancy was right, and Jack was considering my future a burden? If I just leave this house, could Jack build a beautiful family with her? In the evening, I head out to the porch to bring in the laundry. My mother-in-law, Sue, is sitting there with a cat in her lap, gazing out at the garden. Next to her, there are a variety of store-bought cookies and candy lined up. "Oh my, looks like you've got some more offerings here." "The neighborhood kids brought them over." "I bet they used their pocket money to thank you, Sue." You see, around these parts, Granny Sue is something of a local celebrity. Sue's regular spot on the porch overlooks a road across the garden, so it's easy to strike up a conversation with passers-by. This is a small town, and folks from the neighborhood sometimes pop in for a chat. Somehow it started that when people talked to Sue, their problems were solved. People say that if you consult with Granny Sue, she'll give you advice as if she's seen it all herself. Rumors like that spread, and before we knew it, there was this urban legend going around that Granny Sue has clairvoyant powers. I really don't know how many people's troubles Sue has helped resolve. On the flip side, she's getting a bit senile, and there are times when a conversation doesn't really pan out. Still, everyone seems content when they leave, and some even leave thank you gifts like this, so she must be doing something right. It's a bit of a security concern, but it stimulates Sue, and either my husband or I am always home, so we let it slide. It's kind of fun to have an urban legend in the house. "Linda?" "Yes. You don't need to worry about anything. That girl and Jack won't be getting married." "What?" Without me saying a word, Sue hits the nail on the head of my worry. It's quite a surprise. "How do you know they won't get married?" "Just look at her face. It tells me everything." Her face? Indeed, the face she showed while cornering me was straight out of a horror movie. If I were a man, I wouldn't want to marry her. But I wonder if there's any chance for Jack to see that face before their wedding. "Also, your daily deeds will prove themselves." "Mine? What do you think I should do, Sue?" "Well, Linda, oh, look at these cookies. They look yummy. Who gave you these?" "Oh, Sue." At critical moments, she'd retreat back into her dream world. Yet her words still lightened my heart. Sue isn't some supernatural oracle. My father-in-law used to run a business, but he was too trusting and got conned often. So she ended up handling all of the social affairs instead of my father-in-law. I think she honed her discernment of people during that time, and it's still with her. That's probably why she's always drawing people in, and why I trust her so much. Sue's words made up my mind. I won't intervene. I won't meddle in my son's marriage. That's the right thing to do. I've loved my son Jack with all my heart. I'll just support whatever he decides. If he ever comes asking for help, then I'll do everything I can to protect him. Even when I'm anxious and doing nothing feels tough. Still, I decided to trust my non-blood related family and carry on with my daily life as usual. I'm sorry, I think the marriage is off. In the middle of May, Jack, who had suddenly come home, shared this with a somber face. He seemed to have lost some weight since we last met in the spring. Sue's prophecy had quickly come true. While I was surprised, it also felt inevitable. What happened? You both seemed so happy. She had a debt, nearly $50,000. 50? How does someone so young get into so much debt? She was spending it on designer bags and her favorite international artists. She often said she was going abroad for concerts or to buy designer items, but I never thought she was going into debt for it. That's intense. Did Nancy tell you about the debt? No. When we sent out wedding invitations to her friends and relatives, they all declined. Nancy blew up. Her reaction was so strange, so I discreetly asked her friends. They told me she hasn't paid me back the money I lent her, or she stole my belongings and boyfriend. Oh my. When I confronted her, she got defensive and said it's low to snoop around other people's business. We couldn't talk it out, so I called her parents. They said, "You're going to be a couple, don't dwell on the past. A real man would pay off her debt." What? And then she casually mentions her parents are in debt. Apparently, they used to be rich but seem to have failed in their business. However, they couldn't lower their standard of living and have been living by repaying debt with debt. And she's saying things like, it'll all be fine if we support each other. Jack, she's clearly planning to leech off of you. Right? That's why I've decided to call off the engagement. I was a fool not to realize she was such an insincere woman. It seems like she was rushing the marriage to keep me from escaping. Jack, I expect a dispute over the cancellation fee for the venue and our broken engagement, but I'll fight it myself, considering it as a learning experience. I only want to let my parents know that the wedding is off. I'm sorry. I know you were looking forward to it. A powerless laugh escapes Jack, a sight that wrenches my heart. Then my husband William, who had been quietly listening to our son's story, finally speaks. Never mind us. Your happiness is what matters most. If you're in trouble, come to us any time. Isn't that right, Linda? William is asking for my agreement, so I respond with a smile. Of course, you're our precious son. Mom. It seems Jack has been keeping up a strong front all along. Tears well up in his eyes, a sign of relief. Blood relations don't matter. I decide anew that I will always stand by my son's side. A few days later, when William was away on business, Nancy, with a devilish expression, came storming into our home. It's impressive that she made it all the way to our countryside home by herself. Nancy, as if all her pristine image was a lie, glares at me with eyes filled with hatred. I flinch slightly at her openly hostile demeanor, but rally myself thinking of Jack. Linda, you must have manipulated Jack. I haven't said a word. You liar. The gentle Jack I know wouldn't call off our marriage. It seems you've done enough to merit it, haven't you? All I wanted was to make Jack happy. Plus, only I, a princess, can free the prince from the witch's curse. Despite telling him countless times, he can't seem to wake up from the witch's brainwash. Prince, huh? And witch? Well, I don't mind if she's referring to Jack as a prince, but a witch? Who's she talking about? It seems in her head, stepmothers are always the witches leading princes astray. And referring to herself as a princess, isn't she embarrassed? Even so, I came to understand that she was speaking ill of me even to my son. Just because we don't share the same blood. When Jack came to talk about the breakup, he didn't mention that. He was probably being considerate of me. A princess who scams her friends out of their boyfriends and money? That's laughable. Shut up, shut up, shut up. Jack is, well, he's my ideal prince. He's handsome, tall, kind, smart, and works for a good company. He was supposed to become my hero, protecting me from unpleasant people who blame me. Only a princess like me suits Jack. Just as I found it difficult to argue while she was praising my son, a stern voice thundered from behind. That's enough. Sue, my mother-in-law, who was supposed to be on the porch, was now standing in front of Nancy. What? Why are you here? Don't disturb me. Nancy, who did not expect my mother-in-law to intervene, also looked puzzled. There was something strange about my mother-in-law today. should I call it divine? Her eyes were more wide open than usual, and she had an unusually powerful presence. Slowly, my mother-in-law held up a hand mirror, which she had somehow gotten hold of, to Nancy. "Do you see a princess when you look at this face?" Seeing her own face, Nancy became disconcerted. Perhaps she couldn't do her usual convenient mental gymnastics in front of the sudden mirror. There must have been a terribly distorted face reflected in it. "To me, it looks like an evil witch. You are so sinful. You wouldn't find happiness even if you married Jack. It's a pity. Oh, what a pity." It was not anger but pity in her eyes as she stared at Nancy. Her pure sympathy must have been too much for the prideful girl to bear. "Ah!" She ran off from the front door, her hair flailing, crying and wailing. I also felt my strength drain away, and I involuntarily crouched down. Oh, that was scary. "Sue, thank you." Saying that and looking up, I saw my mother-in-law smiling down at me. "You have a good face, you know." Her crinkled warm hand enveloped my cold one. "The wrinkles around your eyes, on your hands, they're proof of the smiles and effort you've put into this house, Linda." "Oh, Sue." Indeed, my mother-in-law always recognized the effort I put in. When I decided to marry my husband, there was quite a lot of opposition from my husband's family due to our age difference and the fact that I was to become a stepmother. But Sue was the only one on my side, saying, "Linda's face shows her heart. Her smiles are genuine, and her hands are those of a hard worker. That's why I became part of the family with my husband and son." "Linda," my mother-in-law's clear eyes looked into mine, "is breakfast ready yet?" I nearly lost my balance from surprise. "It's almost time for dinner, so just wait a bit longer." With a face half laughing, half crying, I took my mother-in-law's hand this time. As he had promised, my son Jack managed to break off his engagement on his own. The cancellation fees for the wedding were negotiated to be covered by her side. Even though Jack managed it on his own, he had consulted a colleague at work who introduced him to a good lawyer. I think it's also a testament to Jack's ability to have built such helpful connections. Nancy never dared to set foot in this house again. When the discussion about the broken engagement took place, it was only her parents who were desperate to make Jack pay a large amount of compensation. She seemed to be out of spirit, as if her soul had been drained. I guess my mother-in-law's words and the sight of her own horrific reflection must have come as a shock. 3 years have passed since then. Jack seemed to have become wary of women for a while, but it looks like he finally found a woman he wants to marry again. She's a nice person who positively reflects me as a stepmother, saying, "It's great that Jack has 2 wonderful moms." Sue looks pleased too, saying, "She has a nice smile." Over 90, Sue is still as cheerful as ever, soaking up the sun on the porch. Her hearing has gotten worse and she doesn't seem to catch much of what people say. But still, people continue to come to visit Granny Sue and talk to her. She doesn't seem to give advice anymore, but it doesn't seem to matter. Everyone leaves with a smile on their face. Sue is like a sunny spot. She has a mysterious power to brightly and correctly illuminate everyone. My son's wedding is just around the corner, so please stay healthy for a little longer, Sue.
My name is Nancy, and I'm 48 years old. Several years ago, I moved into my husband's parents' house to care for my mother-in-law, who has been diagnosed with dementia. Nancy, do you know where my socks are? I want to go for a walk, but I can't seem to find them. Mom, by any chance, have you been wearing 2 on your right foot? Oh my, indeed I have. No wonder it felt strange to walk. Living with her since she was diagnosed with dementia, her symptoms are still mild, so she just occasionally needs help with everyday tasks. Haha, but having 2 pairs of socks on must have kept your feet warm, right? That's not so bad. I suppose you're right. I hear that some people become quite irritable when they develop dementia,
but my mother-in-law seems somewhat fluffy, like a little girl. The stress of caregiving is likely less for me compared to others. All right, all fixed. Shall we go for a walk together? After correcting her socks, we set out for our daily walk. Even though her symptoms are mild, she can't go out alone. Switching to working from home and caring for my mother-in-law can lead to unexpected actions and demands on my time, but this slow-paced life of walking outside every day is peaceful. By the way, I haven't seen Jack around. If he's getting into trouble outside, I'll scold him, you know. At dinner, my mother-in-law spoke. Jack will be back tomorrow. His business trip was a long one this time. Oh, he was on a business trip? I thought he was out gallivanting around again. She looked slightly disappointed, and I gave a bitter smile. Were you planning on scolding him? Well, my husband Jack isn't a bad guy, but he can be a bit loose about certain things. When he gets immersed in his work or hobbies, he loses track of time, and he's also loose about money. Unless I give him his allowance in increments, he will spend it all at once. Whenever my husband caused trouble, my mother-in-law would scold him for me. My mother-in-law, who was originally in a logical field, had a way of logically cornering my husband until he was speechless, which always amused me to see. Surely, compared to the typical mother-in-law and daughter-in-law, my mother-in-law and I must have a quite good living arrangement. Still, as my mother-in-law pointed out, my husband has increasingly been absent from home lately. I cut back on my work and my income decreased, so he said he'd work harder, but for me, it's a bit complicated. That's because the decrease in income is offset by moving into my mother-in-law's house and reducing housing-related expenses, so it's more or less a wash. What I really want is for my husband to value his family more and to come home early. Especially in these last 3 months, he's been coming home late and going on business trips more frequently, which has been concerning. That's how things are as my husband returns from his business trip. As always, I was tidying up my husband Jack's laundry from his business trip when I found an unfamiliar undershirt in his bag. Hey, what's with this undershirt? Huh? Despite my lighthearted question, Jack showed a startled reaction. It was in your bag. It's not something I usually buy, so I was wondering what happened. Ah, that. I bought it myself. The one I had was old, right? It got torn, so I threw it away. Huh? I packed all new ones when you left. Did it really tear? Did it? Maybe it was just poorly made. Oh, I see. My husband's strange behavior made me suspicious. Lily, don't you think this is odd? I speak to the stray cat, Lily. Lily is a calico stray that my mother-in-law dotes on, and she has become quite affectionate towards me as well. Well, even when I talk to her, she can only reply with meow. After that, when I looked closer, there was a faint smell of perfume from the suitcase. Could he be cheating? As I stroke Lily's belly, she returns the favor with her soft paws. Are you trying to comfort me? Meow. Then let's investigate. What? Mother-in-law, you were listening? If something seems strange, you must act immediately. Don't worry, Jack is sloppy. He can't hide anything. There should be evidence left. My mother-in-law chuckles. Mother-in-law, aren't you assuming he's cheating? Well, I retorted, I started investigating my husband. Of course it was to prove Jack's innocence. But, seeing the report from the investigation, I couldn't believe my own eyes. As Jack came home late from his business trip, he lay down on the sofa, exhausted. I softly broke the silence. There's something important we need to discuss. Perhaps sensing my determination, my husband also got up and resettled himself on the sofa. Do you have something you need to tell me? What? Watching my visibly flustered husband, I sighed internally. Do you have something you need to say? What? Nancy, what's going on? Do you have something you need to say? Like my mother-in-law used to question my husband, I fixed my gaze on him. After a moment, my husband hung his head. Well, I'm sorry. The business trip was half a lie. As he said this, he remained hunched over, unable to utter a word more. Who were you meeting? Where did you go?
Well, Nancy, you see.
The more I pressed, the more my husband began to perspire, his eyes darting around the room nervously. So, you're not denying that you met someone and went somewhere?
Well, about that.
Watching my husband wince, I felt as if a weight had been placed on my chest. Do you love your child?
What? Nancy, why?
My husband turned pale in a flash. Do you remember when I asked you about the underwear? After that, I noticed a perfume scent from your bag and I started to investigate you. I showed my husband the investigation report with a picture of his mistress and their child, all smiles.
I only had a thing with her once, years ago when we were both drunk. As soon as I found out she was married, I cut off all contact.
Opening the floodgates, my husband started to spill everything out.
But a few months ago, she suddenly showed up and told me she was divorced, raising the kid by herself and struggling. She wanted to talk to me. As we drank and talked, we somehow ended up back together. But I refused when she asked me to divorce you and remarry her. I refused.
While making his excuses, my husband occasionally cast nervous glances my way.
Then she said, the kid is mine. I denied it because we only slept together that one time years ago, but she insisted on a DNA test. And when we did it, it turned out the kid really is mine. And she divorced her ex-husband because the kid wasn't his. The child was happy to meet their real dad, and well...
After rushing through his explanation, my husband stammered and faltered. What are you planning to do from now on?
Huh? Oh, well...
Seeing my husband flustered, I let out another sigh and sighed my heart. Do you think everything would have been fine if I hadn't found out? Answer me. You know I've been handling the bank account where your salary gets deposited, right? I wondered why the amount didn't increase much even when you came home late claiming overtime and business trips. Then there's the underwear and the perfume. Didn't you think I would get suspicious? Anyway, if this young girl is indeed your child, we need to consider our future. Let's have another talk in a week. Please think it over. However, on the weekend, 5 days later, something unbelievable happened. Nancy! Rushing over at my mother-in-law's call, I saw that she was holding divorce papers and a letter addressed to me in her hand. My husband's section of the divorce papers was already filled out, complete with his signature. And inside the envelope, there was a letter. To Nancy. After giving it a lot of thought, I've decided to leave this house. Now I need to prioritize the future of my child. I can't just leave her struggling with her life. Even though I wasn't planning on having a child, the affection grew when she became attached to me. Please grant me a divorce. I've decided to start a new life with my new family. Also to fulfill my duties as a father. I'm leaving you in my mom's care. I believe that you two get along well, and I can entrust her to you with peace of mind. Take care, Jack. Shall we talk? My mother-in-law gently rubbed my back as I cried out in distress. After hearing the story and reading the letter, she hugged me tightly. Even though he's my son, I can't forgive Jack. I'm not satisfied until he pays for what he's done. But what do you think, Nancy? Depending on your decision, I'm willing to lend my full support. I'm prepared to push him to the wall, so don't hesitate to tell me what you want. The sight of my mother-in-law, filled with a rage that left me breathless, was something I had never seen before. Even though she had scolded my husband several times before, her anger now was beyond comparison. Looking at her face, a change gradually came over me. Mother-in-law, I was wrong. Thinking I should prioritize the kids or try to understand Jack's feelings, I've been behaving as if I was detached from all of this. That's wrong, isn't it? I haven't expressed my feelings to Jack at all, and Jack didn't mention me even once in his letter. It's like I was just a household helper. That's unacceptable. I'll definitely get my revenge. Bubbling anger swelled within me. Then, together with my mother-in-law, we began to plan. We're going to wreck him. The next payday, while I was having dinner with my mother-in-law, we heard a disturbing noise at the front door. He's here. As my mother-in-law chuckled, the doorbell rang. Who might this be? When I responded frostily, Jack looked taken aback on the other side of the screen, yet demanded the door be opened. Oh, you're giving up already, after leaving your wife and mother behind not even 2 weeks past? My mother-in-law chimed in with a mischievous tone. This is not about giving up. Give me back my salary, Jack demanded in a panicked voice. Why? You took your bank book and seal with you, didn't you? Don't you have others? The reason for Jack's desperation was that my mother-in-law and I had his salary account changed at his company. Let's take away his salary. At first, I thought it was impossible. I thought she's really losing her memory. But my mother-in-law just laughed lightly. There's no way they can deposit the salary that's supposed to go to Jack's account into someone else's account. But if it goes into an account in Jack's name, that'll work. Huh? My mother-in-law made a call to Jack's company. Hello, boss. It's been a while. I appreciate you looking after Jack. Today, I'd like to discuss something. The boss of Jack's company is an old friend who admires my in-laws as benefactors. When my mother-in-law proposed her plan, the boss happily agreed. Your salary has been properly deposited into your account. I happen to have an account under your name. I just didn't mention it. Only because of the relationship between my mother-in-law and the boss, this strategy could work. Once the boss understood the circumstances, he agreed to deposit Jack's salary into an account under Jack's name that my mother-in-law had been holding to save money for her child. That's my money! Yes, the fruits of your labor. And since Nancy is your wife, you must provide her with some of your earnings. What? My husband's face registered shock at my mother-in-law's words. Jack, I still have the divorce papers here. They're neither signed nor submitted, so we're still married. What? Honestly, I was tempted to just get it over with and file for divorce immediately. However, as my mother-in-law strategized, I decided it was in our best interest to maintain our marital status, so I kept the divorce papers. If you really wanted to divorce, you should have ensured it was filed, not just left behind. Good job. With that, I hung up the intercom and set it to silent mode. Of course, I had also swapped the keys to the front door and ensured that the chain was securely fastened. The security of the house was foolproof, and the security cameras I had installed in various places were working fine, as I could confirm on the monitor. My husband tried for a while to find a way in, but eventually gave up and went home. You can use the money however you want. No, I think I'll refrain from that. My mother-in-law offered me my husband's checkbook, but I had no intention of using it. While I was entitled to a portion of my husband's earnings for marital expenses, I could manage my living expenses with my salary. I did accept the checkbook, but I simply tucked it away in a drawer. A few days later, my husband showed up at the house again. This time, we had summoned him. He was accompanied by his mistress and their child. The boss? And who? This is a DNA testing expert. They offer on-site service, so we requested it. My smile seemed to irritate my husband. I told you the results are out. But I neither witnessed the initial procedure, nor have I seen the written results. My firm refusal to accept any arguments made my husband reluctantly agree to take the test. You don't seem too enthusiastic. Are you afraid of what the test might reveal? That's fine, we don't mind either way. But remember what we discussed? If you agree to our condition, we'll restore your salary to its original account and fill out the divorce papers. Our condition is that this DNA test will reveal the relationship between the three of you. We ask the boss here to be a witness. Just get it over with. Examine whatever you want if it'll make you happy. My husband heaved a big sigh and encouraged the tester to proceed, but his mistress was behaving quite the opposite. Oh, are you leaving? She backpedaled slowly, roughly pulling her child by the hand and turning to leave without a word. Huh? That was Jack, dumbstruck by the flight of his affair partner. The act was proof of the partner's lies, but we did not ease up in our pursuit. In response to the dumbfounded Jack, my mother-in-law said something profound. You know, if it were me, I'd at least get the test done, collect some immediate cash, and then make arrangements to flee while waiting for the results. Not too bright, is he? Seeing her laugh like that, I was secretly terrified. Whether she had dementia or not, I knew I couldn't make an enemy of this woman.
But the child, it's mine.
Jack stuttered. The specimen, are you sure it was really yours? I added, casually flashing an additional investigation report. It seems your lover is quite popular. She spun similar tales for all the men she's been with during her pregnancy period. But it seems there's one main guy, a jobless she's known since college days. It seems like he might be the real father.
That's a lie.
Why not check it out for yourself? The address is right there in the document. After a hard glare in my direction, Jack snatched the report from my hands and rushed out the door. Unbelievable! My mother-in-law sighed, shrugging her shoulders as we apologized and thanked the president and the contractor for their efforts. The president declined our token of gratitude, instead leaving us a get-well gift, and the contractor agreed to take the previously discussed payment. Soon after, Jack was back, frantically ringing our doorbell. We just looked at each other and gave a resigned chuckle.
The child isn't mine, and all the money left in the bank account has been withdrawn without my knowledge.
The porch light illuminated Jack, his head bowed in disappointment, like a spotlight highlighting a solo actor on a stage. Seeing this, I couldn't help but share a covert laugh with my mother-in-law. So, what brings you here? She managed to ask, stifling her laughter.
Huh? What do you mean, what brings me here?
Like a small child, Jack murmured, but my mother-in-law was relentless. This is the house of the wife and mother you abandoned. You left on your own accord. You have no right to cross this threshold, do you think?
Mom?
Mom? Who are you talking about? I have a lovely daughter who has taken it upon herself to care for me in my old age, even with the burden of my dementia, so I can't possibly have a son who would leave his own mother in the lurch like you did. Tears welled up in Jack's eyes at her harsh words, while on the contrary, I felt a surge of happiness at being called her lovely daughter. Please take the envelope in the mailbox. It contains enough money for your immediate expenses. Be careful not to spend it all at once, or you won't last till your next payday. From next month onwards, your salary will be deposited into your old account.
Nancy, you're the only one for me. If you still have feelings for me, we can start over, right?
Jack's face lit up with hope, but I held no such feelings for him. That envelope is my final act of consideration for you. I'll be filing for divorce soon, so we are strangers from now on. Farewell.
Wait, please, I'm sorry. I swear I'll never do anything like this again. Please, just this once. Forgive.
Jack's plea was cut short with a sharp no from my mother-in-law. Following this, we sold our house and moved out. My mother-in-law had arranged for me to be her legal guardian before her dementia set in, so we were able to sell the house. Once again, I was astounded by her foresight and couldn't help but admire her. Moreover, we moved to a residential care facility. I live in a place close by, which is reassuring. I can see her every day. I have also been able to return to work full-time. After settling down and sorting out the property matters, I filed for divorce and demanded alimony from Jack. My mother-in-law instructed the lawyer to take everything in Jack's bank account. He had no choice but to comply. It's sad that we are not relatives, but I hope we can continue to be close. And that's what I intend for us to be.